Interpreting is a job that requires an intense amount of concentration. There are many processes that are happening in the interpreter's brain at the same time. Let's look at them together. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Alhan and I am an Arabic and Persian interpreter. First is listening. The interpreter has to listen actively to what is being rendered in the source language. At the same time, note-taking happens as well. So the interpreter is listening to what is being said and at the same time taking notes of what he or she is listening to. Note-taking is an aspect of consecutive interpreting. Those interpreters who interpret simultaneously will not be taking any notes. Then at the same time comes comprehension. So this is part of active listening. When the interpreter is listening to something, the interpreter needs to understand the message and not just take the words and interpret them word for word, literally, without conveying the meaning. The meaning has to be understood, comprehended, especially the nuances in the source language. As the interpreter is listening, taking notes, comprehending, the interpreter is also analyzing the information that's getting through the ears into the brain and trying to decide what is the best way of conveying this message. This is the word I heard. There could be a few ways of saying this in my target language. Which one of those am I going to choose? This process is happening very quickly, simultaneously with all the other processes that I am mentioning. Next is the short-term memory. The short-term memory has to remember to fill in the gaps between the symbols and the words that the interpreter is taking notes with and connect the dots that the interpreter is either writing on the paper or typing down, whatever way. So that's another aspect of interpreting that is also integrated in all these little steps that the interpreter is doing all at once within splits of seconds from one another. Before the interpreter renders the interpretation, the interpreter produces the interpretation in their mind mentally and gets prepared to render it verbally. So when the interpreter is doing that mentally, the interpreter is trying to make sure that the grammar is correct, the syntax is correct, and then comes the verbal production of the interpretation, which we would call the delivery. In the delivery, the interpreter is conveying the translated message that has just been done mentally, verbally, in the target language to the target audience with the proper grammar, syntax, and word choice. So now that we've seen all the little steps that happen simultaneously in the interpreter's brain, now we know the importance of taking breaks. It's very easy for the interpreter to reach that point of interpreter fatigue, and that would affect a few aspects. It would affect the interpretation, it would affect the interpreter's mental health, and also sometimes the physical health. So we need to be very careful, take care of our interpreters, and give them the breaks that they deserve. Now, how frequent should these breaks be? The frequency of the break depends on the topic that is being discussed, the duration of the interpreting, and the experience of the interpreter. And I'll give you an example for clarification. One time I was interpreting for a new immigrant. It was an interview that an attorney was conducting with this immigrant. The immigrant was telling their story of how they left their country and came to this country and they were seeking residency. So to me, that was a very interesting topic. It was a story. It didn't have any technical words. It didn't have any difficult meanings. It was very clear and unfolding a human's experience, and I was eager to find out what happens. This interpreting call that I did lasted for 3 entire hours. Was I tired towards the end? I was, but not to the extent of being fatigued. I was very, very interested in listening to the rest of the story, so I kept going. Now, if I was a new interpreter, someone who has started just last week, even if it was just an immigrant story that I am interested in listening to, it would have still been very difficult to do a 3-hour interpretation all at once because the brain takes time to get used to shifting from one language to the other and getting also used to conducting all these processes and steps that we've talked about all at once. It's exactly like someone who is just learning how to drive. When you're first a new driver, you focus on on every brake and every move that you do in the car, especially if you're learning it manually, then that's a whole different process. But after driving for 5 years, 10 years, sometimes you leave your place and get to the destination and don't even know how you got there. That's because you just got used to it. You've done it so many times, you have experience in it, and it's much easier for you than someone who is a new driver. So it's very similar in this situation. So it's the experience, the topic, and the duration. I would never recommend someone doing 3 hours, but in that particular example, I was willing to, and the client was insisting I continue, so I did. The common guideline for the duration of the interpreting is taking either short breaks every 20 to 30 minutes, so a few minutes, a maximum of 5 minutes, or taking longer breaks every hour to 2 hours, and that break would last for about 15 minutes. So you can decide what your needs are as an interpreter and be open in conveying those needs to your employer if you're working for someone. So hope that was helpful to you. If you have any comments, if you have any experience that you would like to share, please write them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, sharing, hitting the notification button, and see you next week. Bye bye.